Welcome to the Delight Your Marriage podcast, the show where you hear from amazing and inspiring wives sharing their struggles, triumphs, and advice for this journey called marriage. Here's your host, Belah Rose.
Hi there, and Merry, Merry Christmas to you. We are just days away from the big day, and I hope that you have spent time preparing your heart and remembering the real purpose of Christmas is to celebrate the birth of our Savior when God became man for his deep, deep love for you and me. So God bless you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We've got a great show for you, and even though the topic is about a particular topic, when a husband is not as interested as a wife, and we dive into that, I think the general theme of the whole conversation is really how to go deeper in intimacy with your spouse. And to the glory of God, really, is what it is all about. So thank you so much for tuning me on today. I think this is going to be a great show. Let me go ahead and share with you a iTunes review. This one says, knows a man's heart. Belah has captured the heart of what a man desires from his wife. Belah is coaching wives that Penny, aka oral sex, is awesome. She has boldness and character to deliver the message of wonderful marriages and healthy wives. Her desire is to serve women. She has introduced me to new bloggers who have rich content. I'm a married man and I can't wait for Tuesday to come. My wife has even started listening. So that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for listening. And thank you so much for getting your wife on board and all of that. And I do want to share that my book, it's called Delight Your Husband, is about this topic. It's a Christian wife's manual to passion, confidence, and oral sex. So it is on sale right now until Christmas. So if you use the code Christmas, just go to my website, Delight Your Marriage, click on the icon and use the code Christmas. You'll get 25% off. I think it would be an awesome gift for your husband this year and to just reinvigorate you and your love life. It really could be that piece that you need to encourage your husband this year. So I would encourage you to do that. And thank you again for the review. The other thing I want to mention is that I'm actually posting this a little later in the day today on Tuesday. I'm so sorry about that if you were waiting for us this morning. Usually I post early in the morning, and this time it just got away from me. So I'm going to be better about it in the new year, so you can be listening early morning on your commute or whatever you do to listen to DYM. I just appreciate that, and I want to honor that you wait for us, and it's just really exciting. But again, we've got a great show for you. I've got Dr. Corey Allen with me today, and he just dives into this topic of how to encourage your husband and how a wife can encourage her husband and how a husband can be encouraged in his drive and together in their intimacy. So it's a great episode, and let's go ahead and dive in. All right, welcome back, Delight Your Marriage listener. I'm really thrilled that you're here. Bear with me today as I've got half of a voice left. Corey and I, we've got Corey Allen, Dr. Corey Allen here with us today. I'm really excited to have him. And we were supposed to schedule yesterday, and then my voice was completely gone. So today it's halfway back. And I thought it was worthwhile to do it today because I really wanted to have him back on and talk about this important topic that we're discussing. But Corey, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm fantastic. And I think just for full disclosure, though, Belah, we have to say that I did the same thing to you. The original time we had this scheduled was the day I woke up without a voice. So,
oh, is that right? I didn't realize.
Yeah, that was several months ago. So
yeah,
it's all right.
Didn't want to do that again.
I'm glad,
here we are finally.
I'm glad we've connected again. So let's roll. It'll be fun.
Yeah, very good. Well, today we are talking about the issue of what about when the husband is not interested in sex? So often we hear about the wife not being interested or not having the same drive, but what about when it's the husband? And I've had several women ask me about this, and I just wanted to really get an expert's opinion. So how do you start to kind of approach this, Corey?
Well, I think just to set the framework, we have to start the whole conversation with the idea that sex is a language And I think this is what we talked about the very first time I was on your show.
Yeah.
However long ago that was, I don't even remember. But
Yeah.
so there's two things that come to mind. One is that sex is a language, and it's interchangeable with how we do life in my mind. How we do sex is how we'll do life. How we do life is how we'll do sex. And then the other thing is that in every single relationship, especially when it comes to sexual desire, somebody's going to have more desire than the other. That I don't believe in matched desires. I think one person is always higher than the other on everything, but specifically in sex. That one person is going to be more interested in sex than the other person. And so I phrase it that way just because the whole goal is that it'll take the idea of right and wrong out of it, and it'll put it in a perspective of a continuum that when you're in comparison with somebody else, your desire is either going to be higher or lower than theirs. And that's just the reality of every single relationship with humans because of the uniqueness of us and the differences of us. And so I think if we can take out the idea that there's something actually wrong, then maybe we disarm a little bit of this conversation so that way we can have a more calm rational conversation rather than a reactive one, which often anytime, full well, anytime the whole subject of sex comes up, if there's any kind of issue, it's usually not real rational and calm. It's usually real reactive and defensive.
Yeah, absolutely. How can a couple get past that, out of that reactive?
Well, again, I think it's just starting to recognize that what if there's actually nothing wrong? That just because my desire is not the same as my partner's, what if there doesn't mean there's something wrong? And what if that's just what happens in relationships? And the example I use is like if you're the partner in your relationship that wants to have sex 3 times a week, and you're married to somebody that wants to have sex once every other week, you are the high desire partner then.
Yeah.
But if something happened through choice or tragedy in that relationship, and then you all of a sudden marry somebody else, and now you've married somebody that wants to have sex 5 times a week, you just became the low desire partner and nothing changed in you. So it's trying to recognize that just because there's differences, it's how do we want to approach those differences? We can either see them as opportunities to grow and expand and stretch myself, or I can see it as opportunities to dig my heels in and try to get you to do it the way I want to rather than the way they want to. And in that kind of marriage in a nutshell, if you think about it. So it's if you can take a little bit of the right and wrong out of it, or the low desire partner needs to be fixed, there must be something wrong, and you can just start to see it as preference or comfort or enjoyment, because there's sometimes, some of the couples I've worked with where this is an issue that comes up a lot in therapy is, lots of times the person that has the lower desire, they have a better picture that the sex they're having isn't really worth wanting, and because they're not getting much out of it. And so
that's the low desire, or
that's typically the low desire partner. I mean, the stereotypical example I use is if the wife is the low desire partner, oftentimes it becomes that way because she's servicing her husband is kind of the easiest way to describe it. Yeah. And so what she actually has good judgment because he's just all about his needs, not hers. And so why would she want to have more of that? If it's all about him, she's not getting any real pleasure out of it, then she has usually a better picture on that sex is not worth wanting. So if you can kind of view it a little different as a language, maybe we change the dynamic, which leads us to the topic today of what happens when it's the husband that's the low desire. Yeah. Because this does happen. It is more prominent than a lot of people think or say. My just impromptu research from the amount of couples I have in my office, I would say probably about 40% would be the husband is the low desire.
Yeah.
And so
I've seen stats closer to 25%, but that might
and that's this is all just informal research. This is just based on the topics I know that come up from the people, and I just I just have research brain, and so
Well, and it might also be that the wives are bringing their husbands are more proactive about bringing them in to see what
what they can fix, how they can fix this kind of is what you're saying. So.
Well, sure. But I just think that it's more prominent than a lot of people think. And I wanted to try to make sure that's very clear to an audience to realize, especially for wives, because to realize you're not alone. Your husband is not an anomaly. He's not the only man on the planet that isn't interested in sex as much as you. It's one, just to try to normalize that, and then also to recognize sometimes those desire differences shift to where at one point in your marriage you might have been the low desire as the wife, and then now as it's gone along and you hit your 40s, or the typical stance is when a woman hits her 40s, her desire sometimes gets a little bit of a spike, and largely it's because she's more comfortable in her own skin, and she feels a little sexier because she's just kind of more comfortable with who she is. And so she's willing to let go a little bit and be a little fun and adventurous that maybe she hadn't prior. And so it's just to really let people recognize, hey, there's a big group of people out there that the wife is the high desire. And that's just part of it. And I still just want to help make sure couples recognize neither end of the spectrum is right or wrong. They're just differences.
And now what about when the wife is really discontent with the way things are in this? Like, how can she kind of move things into a way that makes her feel more desired? And rejection is really hard to take, and to take it consistently from your husband is pretty hard.
Yeah, it is. And I think there's a difference between male female here that is rejection for a woman is different than rejection for a man a lot of times. Okay. And the visualization I use for this, or at least the symbol, I guess you could do, is just look at the biology of us. Yeah. If in my case, if I make a move towards my wife and she rejects me, she's rejecting an appendage of mine. If she makes a move towards me and I reject it, I'm rejecting an internal organ of hers. So interesting. So it's kind of it's a little more personal, Yeah. So it's. I think men, we typically have this whole, maybe it's the way we were raised with sports and achievement and stuff, that we realize we're going to strike out, but you go back up to the plate and you bat again. And so it's easier to brush off. But I think for a woman, it's more risk a lot of times. And so it's harder for her to initiate because of the rejection, especially when she's the high desire and he has checked out or is not interested. And so that makes a difference.
Yeah, I think it really does. And I think also it has to do with beauty as well, because when a wife is initiating, she's saying, here I am. Do you think I'm beautiful? Right. Do you find me attractive? Right. Do you care about who I am? Right. And the rejection makes her feel like her beauty isn't enough for him to feel intrigued.
And I would say the same thing to wives that I say to men, to husbands, that if you make a move that's an overture towards sex and it's rejected, as best you can recognize it's not necessarily you that's being rejected, it's sex that's being rejected. And it's trying to recognize the difference there, because it's real easy to think that when I get rejected, then I extrapolate that to all of me, rather than the joke I always use is, if my wife rejects an overture of mine, it could be because having sex in the aisle at Target's not a good idea. And so that's why she said no. And that's actually good judgment then.
Sure
but it's not me. She's not saying I don't ever want to be around you. She's just saying not right now. And so it's really trying to figure out how can we disarm the conversation so it's less emotionally laden with things. Yeah. And it's more just realistic about, okay, this is a process. This is a language. And if I can start to decipher some of that on what it means to me and what I'm trying to get across, maybe I disarm both of us in the process.
Yeah, I really like that you said not to extrapolate that out to all of who you are. It's rejecting sex, not yourself.
But then that leads, Bella, that goes right into the whole idea of, well, what do you do when you're always rejected for sex, though? Because first off, you got to take the word always out. Because at some point you probably weren't rejected. So the always nevers, those are just igniter statements that just inflame things even more. And if you take them at face value, they're usually lies, because there has been one instance where he didn't, his guard was down and sex happened or something, or he pursued you, or so it's trying to be more accurate and more real of, okay, so a majority of the time when I make an overture, it's rejected. So some of it comes down to how do you invite rather than pursue? And I'm just off the top of my head. I hadn't thought we'd go down this process, but so some of this might be a little jumbled. But I think we want to inspire it. And I was thinking from a woman's perspective, and so this is a little bit of a outsider's perspective because I'm not one. But I just think of, I had a client a long time ago that he was very, very sexually playful with her throughout the day. And it would get her going. She would get turned on and get pretty excited. And then whenever the time came at the evenings where they could actually get together, he wouldn't follow through. And it was really making her mad, which understandable, because I know for lots of women, that's the whole analogy. Women are more like crock pots. They need the slow boil to kind of really get going, whereas men are microwaves most of the time. So he would do a lot of this pursuit, and then he would just cut it off. And so she was really mad about it, because I was working with them both at the same time. And anytime I'm doing sex therapy, I always do either just men or the couple. I don't do sex therapy with women. because that's too risky for me as a male therapist. So
it's a good boundary.
So she, I was trying to build her confidence, or at least uncover her confidence in the sexual arena, because you could tell it was there. And so she was like, I think I'm really good at what I can do and who I am. And so I just encouraged her. I said, okay, so what would happen if, he next time he does this and you feel like he's not going to follow through, you just walk right past him and brush past him and look him in the eye and say, hey, we're heading to the bedroom. If you don't want to join me, I'll start without you. And just go enjoy the pleasure that you can have. And that's kind of sometimes a hot button for people on masturbation and what is that right or wrong. And I don't really want to go there on this show, but it's really kind of, I think that's an empowering statement of basically saying to your spouse, it's much more enjoyable when you're a part of this, but I don't have to have you as part of it.
That's interesting.
And I think, isn't that kind of an inviting statement? Tell me what you think as a woman, Bella, because you've been one. So
I would say that seems very empowering, that you're not just at the whim of your spouse. You're going to say, I'm going to have a great time regardless.
Right. And that's the difference, I think, between the male female is for a husband to join you in sex, he has to be able to have an erection if you're going to have penile vaginal intercourse. He can do a whole lot of other things, obviously, whether there's erection or not. But for a wife, it's a little easier for a wife to just do obligatory sex, isn't it? Because she doesn't, obviously arousal helps, but it's not necessary. So there's a little bit of a difference for men, I think, that if you've got, any kind of performance anxiety, any kind of ED issues, or even premature ejaculation issues, that sometimes us as men, we don't want to face the things that really bedevil us. So it's easier just to stay away from it, even when there's pain as the fallout from it. And so it's kind of recognizing that sometimes when a husband is the low desire, there's other factors involved that create that. It's not a relational thing, maybe, as much as it is an individual thing.
Now what can a wife do? Let's say there are some of those factors involved. Can we kind of go point by point with some of these things that she can help with?
Sure. Well, and again, this is kind of at the foundation that the husband wants to address this as well. Because you know full well, if you want your spouse to do something different and they're not on board, that's banging your head against the wall. I mean, to a degree. It doesn't, I still don't believe we shy away from that. I think we still speak our mind and our truth and our desire, but we can't, require it from them because that's just like if you have a child as an infant, that's the one thing I loved when this is a quick side note just to make the point. that when I took my daughter, who's 10 now, but when she was a newborn and she wouldn't eat certain things, and at one of her pediatric checkups, our doc, who's a friend of ours, I was just, he's like, so how is she? And I was just going through it all. And I said, well, she won't eat such and such and such and such. And I don't even remember what it was. And he said, well, that's the one thing children can really do, is they can control what goes in their body and what comes out of their body. That's really all the control they've got. And I'm like, that's a good way to think of it, because I think that's the way we are as people too. That my wife may want things of me, but she doesn't have control over that. And so I have to figure out, how do I still be true to what I want and who I am and who we can be without forcing it? Because do you really want somebody to have sex with you by being forced to? That's usually not a real romantic, fun, engaging time, because they don't even want to be there. So it's, how do I flip that to a little bit more of an empowered stance to invite it? And so, what I think of, if a husband is on board and at least recognizes, you know what, you're right, our sex life isn't what it could be, then I think a wife can be really beneficial and supportive in helping him. What off the top of my head, for a husband, one of the first things to do is rule out medical things.
Right.
Because there can be medical issues with testosterone that's low.
That's right.
Blood flow, circulatory issues with the different heart diseases we've got. And, cholesterol. I mean, all that kind of stuff that can really slow down blood flow will affect erections. And there's most men, because we are raised knowing the importance of our penis, just because, think of every little boy, he always checks to make sure it's still there. Well, men still do it too. It's just much more subtle, but it's still there, so I'm like, just making sure. And so if something's not working, that's a big identity thing. And so it's a bigger issue to admit, you know what, I'm having issues.
Right.
And that's a hard thing for a lot of men to address. And so it really is courageous to do so. And so a wife and her support of that can be really helpful. And then the other stuff to think of, just kind of ruling out, is just, what are some of the environmental factors that could be playing out? You got stress, work, relationship stress, kids, all of those kinds of things. Anxiety is one of the biggest erection killers I've ever come across, is anxiety.
Yeah.
So most of the stuff where people come in and think they have ED issues and it's physical, I think usually we'll find out it's probably maybe a little physical, but it's more anxiety and stress.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. And just so everyone knows, it's erectile dysfunction is ED, just in case.
Yeah. And that's, trouble having the soldiers stand up and salute. is the medical terminology. There you go.
Oh, the medical terminology. Right. Yeah, but I like that you mentioned the heart disease and some heart issues, because that absolutely does. It can be an early indicator of. We had a doctor on many episodes ago. I think it's episode 21, in case anyone is interested. But the heart disease it could be alerted of years in advance if we just paid attention to erectile dysfunction.
Yeah, and I think obesity plays into it too. Weight issues can play out in the bedroom, and performance issues. So, and then you add to it a component that this just popped in my head, that as a man ages, it can change. It can be harder because the erection's not as firm and it doesn't stand as tall, and that's an identity thing. Of I can't last as long as I used to, or it takes longer, and so all of those things can be hits. Women, I think, face that all their life of identity, of I don't look right, I don't feel right, all of that. Whereas men, it's a little easier. We're a little more impervious to that, but we're not completely impervious to it, especially when it comes to the bedroom.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that comes to my mind, just to add the last little couple of points, is I think you can also be looking at trauma things. If you got some major baggage from growing up, any kind of abuse, any kind of things like that happen as children, as teenagers, there can be guilt and shame associated with it. If there's some religious upbringing that has played out in really negative ways, which unfortunately a lot of times religion seems to do that. It's not tackled this subject well. So, which is why I have Sexy Marriage Radio. So, is to try to help make it, hey, let's talk about what's good and how this is really designed to be a great thing in marriage.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then if you have porn, you add porn usage to it, that can play out in the bedroom for men really rampantly. So, I mean, there's lots of different factors. And so some of it is just trying to unpack it. And for a wife, this can be really, really dangerous, or not dangerous, hurting, you know, because it's easy to take. Let's take, for example, maybe a husband's having issues in the bedroom with ED, and it's actually a porn-induced erectile dysfunction disorder. And that's not an actual DSM disorder, but it probably will be before long, just because it's very prominent. Yeah. And what that is the brain has been rewired differently because of rampant porn usage. And so a wife discovering that, there's a lot of hurt that comes with that. And so
that's right.
This can be a very volatile area to and so I would just say straight out, a husband's porn usage has nothing to do with a wife. Most of the time. There are exceptions to that, but a majority of the time it has nothing to do. It's something he's had as part of his life. I went into marriage thinking my marriage would solve my porn usage, and it didn't do it. So it's one of those, I had that long before I met my wife, and it happened for a while I was with my wife. And so it's recognizing, okay, this isn't about her. This is my demon I've got to confront and really address. And and so the more I can do that and also recognize my wife doesn't take it personally, even though it hurts, and even though there's the comparison, and how can that not be an identity hit and feel betrayed? And I get all of that, but it's the more you can recognize this is our thing. It's not a personal and direct thing.
Yeah. So that we talk a lot about porn on the show because it's so huge. It's just everywhere, and it's probably affected your husband at some point. And
and let's be fair, because it's affecting women too. So
that's
sometimes a woman or a wife can be the high desire because of unrealistic expectations based on erotic fiction or porn. So it's not setting up what reality is. And so what she's actually seeking as the high desire isn't coming out of fullness. It's actually coming out of emptiness. That she wants that sexual gratification or satisfaction or just orgasmic release, because that's how she has an identity, even though that could be an emptiness thing, that I want it filled up to help me feel better about me, rather than I feel pretty good about me and I want to share this with you. And so there's a little difference on what drives us. And I think that comes from both sides. For both genders face, are we seeking sex out of fullness or sex out of emptiness?
And I remember you talked about that last time a little bit too. When you say that, I mean, how practically can a wife kind of come to the bedroom with fullness instead of emptiness?
Well, I think
this is her issue.
Some of it comes down to what you've alluded to before, of it's like a beauty that's being unveiled. It's an essence of her that it's, her unveiling is not contingent on his reaction. It's almost I know I'm beautiful. I know I'm good. I know I'm loving. I know. And it's kind of that confidence thing. Yeah. It's that willingness to be open. It's that willingness to be vulnerable. It's that willingness to even be exposed, to be playful, to be erotic, to do some of those things that may make you feel kind of slutty, sorry, but to know I'm not one. I'm a full
this is with
grown,
your husband.
Yeah, I'm a full grown woman, and what I want is okay, and that's kind of a huge growth thing for a lot of us, isn't it? Especially in this area of sex.
Absolutely.
Because there's a carnality to it that we feel kind of dirty about. Or society definitely makes it feel kind of dirty about it. But hey, when it's you and it's your essence sharing it with your spouse, I think that's kind of the whole intention of it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I love that. Now, I want to ask you about in the Bible, you know how it talks about a husband not denying his wife and a wife not denying her husband. What about that in this context when a wife is really desiring it more than he is? Isn't it kind of not biblical for him not to be, going with her for it?
Well, man, this is a dicey dicey area. Well, I don't.
Is.
I mean, because Scripture says to not deny each other except for specific times for devoting to prayer. Yeah. Right. That's kind of the context of it. And so,
yeah.
Does that? What it doesn't say is, are we supposed to have sex once a week, once a month, once a year? So
right.
That's where it kind of can get off the rails. And if that scripture is being used to require, typically I don't think that's the intent of the scripture. It's more, wait, how can I live my life in such a manner that is inviting to my partner, that is inviting to the spirit of my marriage and who I want to be? And because we live in a fallen world, and there's lots of things that have been done to damage that even more because of our frailty and stupidity. Yeah. And so if there's something that, I think that scripture comes into play whenever it's used in a manner that, hey, I'm completely withholding this and it's intentional. Then, okay, hold on. What's that really about? Because then it's a power thing. It's not a love-based thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know if, as odd as this may sound, I'm trying to think just real quick through the Rolodex of clients I've had of a husband that's been a low desire that's intentionally withheld it as a power thing. And I know it happens because there's a cruelty to us as humans that we can do that to our partner.
Yep.
But a majority of the time, it's their own stuff that they're not willing to confront, and you just are the collateral damage as the wife. And so it's almost, how do you be an ally to them to reframe what's going on and invite maybe it a little differently? So,
yeah, I like that. So how can you be an ally to them and invite them?
Yeah. That's kind of our whole goal as married people anyway, I think, is to create good alliances with our partner. Partnership's another way to think of it. But I love the vernacular of alliances because that means there's a requirement from both sides. And if one person drops their alliance, it's not a personal attack of my alliance. It's just I need to react in a manner that waits to see what they do. Do they pick it back up? Do I need to adjust? This is how it. I think this unfolds in sex a lot in marriage because you know each other pretty well, so you kind of know what's going on and where they are. Yeah. If they're really into it or if it's different. You kind of pick that stuff up when you've had a lot of experience with the same person, which I think is beautiful to look at it as a language. But if you start to look at it as, okay, so if something's unfolding during sex and your spouse drops their alliance, meaning they get lost in their own head or they lose it, maybe it was all based on the biology of, man, I'm feeling really aroused and into this. And then all of a sudden something came in and now it's gone, I lost my erection, or a woman just lost her mental engagement because a child coughed or something. All these different things.
Less than that has to happen.
Well, it's true. But lots of different things can derail us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you think about it, a lot of times what happens is the partner who did not lose their connection takes their spouse's disconnect as personal. Like, well, what happened? And like, you never want, and that's where we start to get way out of line in a sense. So what if I were to actually take that better and say, hey, what's going on? Where are you? And we reestablish an alliance again. And then we pick it back up wherever we can, because it's not like we necessarily have to start where we were. Maybe, I've actually said this to my wife of sex has been unfolding and then something happened and she disconnected. And I'm like, okay, because the old Corey would have just powered on through to finish. And that's kind of manipulative and cold. when I think about it. Because now I don't want just sex for sex. I want the times with her. I want sex to be connections between us, not just a physical thing. I want a deeper thing with her. And so to get there, I've actually said, where are you? What's going on? And then she would come at me with, well, here's what happened. Sorry. I'm like, okay, do we need to back up? What do you, what can I do? How I'm here. What do you need? And I don't know. I was like, okay, well, we'll kind of feel our way through it. I'll take the lead again and kind of feel my way through it. And if that's not working, sometimes that means it's not going to work. And okay, I need to be less attached to an outcome and more in line with what am I really seeking? What am I really wanting underneath this all? And see if I can find that a different way. Because maybe a wife is seeking sex as a way to really feel emotionally connected to her husband.
Right.
Because that's what she's been conditioned to think, that's the way, you connect to a man's emotions through his penis. Well, maybe not. So what if there's another way to satisfy that emotional connection by just looking him in the eye when you're talking, or when you're having dinner, or dance, or snuggle, or do other things where you take sex off the table for a little bit, and maybe you find it. Yeah. And maybe that brings about an arousal to him. I don't know. It's just trying to recognize that we don't have to follow a script.
Yeah.
That we can basically make up the script as we go along if we can learn to hold on to ourselves better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I especially like the thought of not feeling like you have to power through if something real happened. Like what happened? Let's figure that out. Let's have an intimate exchange here, not just orgasmic release on both sides or whatever, or on one side or the other. But
right.
Yeah, I really like that.
Because that moves it. I mean, I'm sorry to step on you there for a second there, Bella, but because that moves it beyond just functional sex. Because functional sex to me is one or both of you know the steps to take to reach orgasmic levels of release. I mean, that's what it is. That you stroke long enough, you're going to have an ejaculation. You rub long enough, you're going to have an orgasm. So done. It's just biological then. It's just plain pleasure on a human level. But if lots of couples just reach that point in their marriage and they don't know there's actually more to it. And I believe there's a whole lot more to it.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden we can get into, mind to mind connection, soul to soul connection during sex. And sometimes it's during sex. Sometimes it's just during life. Yeah. And I think that's what we all really want to taste in married life. We just don't know it because we're not quite sure how to find it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know we could do a whole nother podcast on that, but in terms of a first step, what would be the first step?
Specifically during sex? Is that what you mean? Or
well, I mean, my answer to the question I was trying to ask was I would assume you'd say something like honesty or something like that.
Okay.
Like
sure.
Being truly honest with what's going on in sex or what would you say?
I would say be present in your life and in your marriage in ways you haven't been.
That's good.
So that whether you're in sex or you're not, that when you come home from work, you actually engage your partner. You put the phone down, you close the laptop, and you connect, even if it's just for a minute or two. Because this isn't, nobody can sustain 100% presence with the people they're with indefinitely. We need moments to break. And so we need to move to sequential kind of presence rather than multi-presence, I guess you could think. So I just think it's just being more present is how you start. Honesty would be a next layer or a step along with that. Specifically during sex, I would say open your eyes because a lot of times we close our eyes to focus on sensations. But most of those times when we've done that, we've actually disconnected from our partner because we're just focusing on our sensations and what they're providing or what they're doing. And so I would say open your eyes and not open your eyes for the visual, because this is a men thing that lots of times, lots of husbands are like, my eyes are always open because I like how she looks, and like, I get that. but I'm saying open your eyes and actually connect eye to eye, and look each other in the eye during sex.
Yeah.
And that sometimes will make it really different in a good way. Well, sometimes in a bad way, but eventually it becomes a very, very good way, because you can all of a sudden now you're seeing each other behind the eyeballs and you're inviting each other in. And that's what allows you to get to situations where if something changes, all of a sudden there's been a shift. I had a client I was working with that they were learning this process, and they loved it because in the middle of sex, he lost his erection, and it's something that had happened early in their relationship, but he had figured out through fantasy and some other things how to keep it. And which is a disconnection if you think about it.
Right.
So he was really working to be more present. And so what he did is once it happened, she sensed it, obviously, because it was in the middle of intercourse. But it wasn't completely, it wasn't just an obvious, it was just a slowly losing of it. And he then started panicking, but he had his eyes open and she saw that. She didn't feel it different. She just saw it in his face. And so what she did, because they were just explaining this to me, and I was just big old smile on my face because I love hearing clients and seeing them really come through when it's the best in them.
Yeah.
And she just said, what I did is I just stopped for a second and I leaned down and gave him a really good kiss. And then I used my skill to bring him back to an erection again. And it's like, well done.
Yeah.
Because he actually had to allow that to happen rather than what he wanted to do. And what most men do is run from it. No, I don't, that's too risky. Rather than, hold on, what if her femininity could draw that back out of him? And that's the power I think the feminine has.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, and it takes a confident woman to do that,
and a confident man, if you think about it, because this isn't about confidence in the sense that he has an erection or not. This is about confidence in knowing who he is and who he's not. Yeah. And so if he's an older gentleman, which this guy was, older, 50s, that's not old because I'm fast approaching that. But it's just the whole, his body was changing and he was confidently addressing that rather than thinking I had to be in my 20s where I could have instant erections. And, no, I'm not that. He knew he was so much more.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yep. That's so true. That's so true. And as a united couple, they can work through those things together, which is
that's the whole idea of being allies. And that's the idea of where a wife can be fantastic for a husband. Is what comes to my mind is that movie Cinderella Man.
I haven't seen it.
Okay. With Russell Crowe as the boxer where he's Jim Braddock, and based on a true story. But so he's fighting for the heavyweight championship, and it's against a guy that's killed people in the ring. She didn't know this because this was before 24-hour news channels and everything. So when she finds this out, obviously she's scared. She's not supporting him for this fight, and he's like, "I've got to do this because this is how I'm providing for my family." So he's in his own world, she's in her own world, and then right before the fight, she shows up and tells him, "Hey, I'm in your corner. I'm here. You're the champion of my heart," and that kind of stuff. And I think to a husband, that's what they desperately want from their wife, is to know, not to be a cheerleader, but to be a support.
Yeah.
Cheerleading's a part of that, maybe, but it's more, this is a deep depth, I'm here with you.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
That's the role a wife can play when a husband is really facing some of these things that are painful or scary or identity hitting. And so a wife that can be, present and supportive and loving and inviting, that goes a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it could go a long way in the various issues that maybe he's facing, some of the things that we talked about, or, I think my last question for you, Corey, is about, there are husbands that listen to this as well, but for husbands, and maybe some wives are going to have their husbands listen to this episode just to get the conversation started and talk about these things, because that would be really wise. But for husbands, what are some proactive things they can do to up their drive if they wanted to?
Well, one of the things is you got to rule out medical, because a lot of times just because of what we eat and the lifestyle we're living and the what we've done to our bodies has wreaked havoc on our testosterone. Yeah. And so if your testosterone is not at all existent, there's ways you can find to boost that's not medical even. It's diet changes, it's working out. I mean, because I'm a big believer that the body will heal itself if we'll feed it right and treat it right. Yep. And so a lot of times I've got to just be an educator of my own self, you know, and a student of my own body and learn better. The testosterone patches and pills and those kinds of things, those could work. There's side effects to them. And I know I've got clients that use them because their other lifestyle choices have just made their testosterone non-existent, and that's what they wanted to go that route. And it's like, I'm fine with that. Do it under medical supervision. Don't just do it off of an infomercial. Right. Yeah. But so it's being willing to address what the medical things is. Go get a physical, which I'm speaking to myself here because it's been 3 years, I think, since my last one. But it's just one of those, take care of your body. So the other thing a husband can do that I think reaps tremendous benefit is just start exercising. That's right. Be active, lift weights. Yeah. Is a great thing. Do something competitive is a great thing, because that, masculinity bestows masculinity, and iron sharpens iron. And so if I can do things with other people, which I play basketball with the same group of people, basically 3 or 4 times a week at lunch. Wow. And just being with them and the competitive trash talk and all of that, it boosts me, because it's part of just guys being guys. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with really being competitive and being mad when you lose. And I mean, that's life kind of stuff. Yeah. And so the more, I just think of the 3 things I tell men when it comes to just creating a great cake of life is to do what, let's see, it's have good same-gendered friends. So find some guys and just have a couple of them that are good friends that you can do things with. Yeah. Have regular strenuous exercise, and that's 3 or 4 times a week for at least 20 to 30 minutes where you're really sweating and working. And then whatever you do it passionately. Yeah. So if you're working on something at the house, do it passionately, whatever that means. I love to have fun with what I do. That's my passion. And so unloading the dishwasher for me is a fun thing, because I make it fun with my kids. We race to see, how can we get everything unloaded if we all work together in less than a minute and a half, go. And we all are, frantically going around the kitchen, but we're laughing and having fun. And luckily nothing's broken yet. So it's just recognizing those 3 things, I think, are just great tips to help men be better men. Yeah. And that's going to spill over into our sex life. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And working out is also a great aphrodisiac. You might want to make love right when you walk in the door after. Absolutely. Or you'll need help in the shower. So yeah, there you go. Perfect. Well, Corey, this has been awesome. I think there's been so many tips that wives can implement in their own lives and also husbands. So thank you so much. Absolutely. You are so much fun to talk to, girl. I have to just share it to your audience. They have a great benefit because you are a great conversationalist on good things, and I like it. I appreciate that so much. And even with my little voice squeaked it out. I'm so grateful. You did great. I didn't even notice. Awesome.
Wow, fantastic, Corey. Thank you so much for your insights, and it was such fun to chat with you. Corey has a website, simplemarriage.com, that I'd love for you to check out. You can click on Sexy Marriage Radio and you can listen to their podcast there. And they've got a lot of great insights and a lot of fun on their podcast. So check them out there. Otherwise, I'd love for you to just spend some time in the next week, or let me also say that next week I'm not going to have a show released. We're going to take the week off and spend time reflecting and enjoying and vacationing a little bit. So I love to start the new year really being intentional, thinking about what God has done in this last year, what He's going to do in the new year, and what my dreams and hopes are, and what He's taught me and what He's teaching me and what I believe is coming. And I just love to do that, especially time to unite with my husband and really reflect and think about the good things that God is bringing into our lives and where He's taking us. So I just encourage you to do that with your husband and your wife this next week and a half. That's my homework for you, is to really reflect on what God's done and dream a little bit about what He's going to do. I know for us, this past year has been one of the hardest years of my entire life. And, through heartache and pain, God teaches us things. It says that He disciplines and He chastens those He loves. It says that the gold has to be purified in the fire. So I know that God is doing really important work in my heart through these challenges. And I think I'm going to share more about those challenges in the new year. I've really not shared much of them with you, but as God shows me to reveal that information, I will. But I do believe if you're in the midst of struggle, or you're in the midst of trial or difficulty, God has a plan for you. He has a plan for your life. He's not done with you. And so these difficulties, these heartaches, these hardships are producing in you character. And I believe in James, it talks about the point of trials is to eventually produce perseverance. And so count yourself blessed that God counts you as one that can handle these trials and difficulties, because He's birthing in you something that cannot be taken away, perseverance. So I believe that's what something is God's teaching me, and it's hard and it doesn't feel good, and it's difficult, but in all things we really can rejoice, just like Paul in the midst of his chains, in the midst of prison. He says, "Rejoice in the Lord always." Again, I say rejoice, because somehow God is working all things together for good. As it talks about in Romans. So I just encourage you to wrap up this year with hope, because we serve a God of hope. He is the God of hope. So have hope this year. Have hope in what God's doing and what He's done in your heart and in your life this year, this Christmas, this new year. Bring it into the new year for inspiration and hope this year. Thank you so much for making DYM a part of your life. Thank you so much for including us in your routines or your day-to-day life, in your conversations with your friends, in your time when you wrote a review for us. You are such a blessing, and I believe God is really touching marriages through this ministry. So to God be the glory, and thank you so much for how you've partnered with us this last year. I'm praying for you. I honor you. God bless you. May He continue to bless you and bless this new year for you. And we'll be talking to you in January. I'm excited. First week, tune in to us on Tuesday. God bless you and enjoy. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Stop by delightyourmarriage.com to check out all the show notes, as well as many more resources and articles. Until next time, live with love, wisdom, and passion.